23. So it was 22 years, 11 months, 20 days.
21. No, because it's February. Yeah, 20 days. Yeah.
So 23.
Yeah, yeah.
20,
20.
23 years. So 23 years in the Air Force. And I want to start off. I'm going to do the rapid fire questions like
Oh,
I do with most of the guests. Yep.
my
Yep.
gosh.
Oh,
Oh,
we didn't talk about that, did we?
no, we're just jumping right into it,
Okay.
apparently.
So,
Do it.
book recommendation.
I Can See Clearly Now by
Okay.
Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Okay. And favorite television series.
Oh my God. Favorite television series. I would have to say, I don't know. Oh my God. This is supposed to be rapid fire.
Of
Uh,
all time.
of all time.
All
Oh, The
time.
Office. The Office.
Oh, The Office.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I kind of got like a little mega desk thing going over here with my.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, oh, you once you said of all time, then it was clear.
Anything recently you watch?
I actually was watching a hospital show for a little bit. I don't know. I'm really into reading lately, so like TV, I
Yeah.
haven't really checked out too much. Actually, I am so lying to you. Um, Ancient Aliens is my favorite show. Um,
What's that?
yeah, it's just I'm a space geek, and so that is like my more serious favorite show, and then The Office is just like lighthearted, super fun.
Yeah, we're kind of the same along the same lines. Like we've been watching Yellowstone, and we're have you watched that?
No,
Oh, Yellowstone is so good with Kevin Costner. Um, but then we'll watch something comedy wise, and then we've been on a Forensic Files kick as of late. So
okay, all right.
yeah,
Well,
I've learned I could get away with nothing through watching that show.
not these days. My God.
Yeah. If you could have one job for a day just to try, what would you do?
One job for a day, I would say I would work at a amusement park, and I would go on all the rides before anyone was there.
Okay. What theme park specifically?
Probably Hershey Park, because
Okay.
Pennsylvania and
Pennsylvania. Yep.
Hershey.
Okay. What,
It's a really hard
what's
question.
what's the one in Ohio? Cedar Points.
I think so.
I'm
I
gonna
think
get hate
so.
messages from Ohio. They're very people from Ohio are very defensive of that theme park.
Oh, well, then you better get it right.
Yeah,
Edit.
I have to edit this. Very defensive. If you want to irk someone from Ohio, just say that Magic Mountain is better than Cedar Points or whatever it's called. So
I'm filing that away.
there goes my Ohio listeners right now. What about what job would you not want to have for a day? Worst job out there.
Oh God, I was about to say something mean. Um, the worst job out there. Anything I have to just this is like kind of blanket, but anything where I'm just standing there waiting for something to happen.
Okay.
I can't like I need to be doing something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So you couldn't guard anything.
no, which is kind of why I cross trained as a security forces.
Okay. So right from the get go, defender life was okay.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you a total pause from the rapid fires.
Oh my God.
Secfo, does that term annoy you?
I've never heard that term. Is that a thing? Because it's already annoying, but go ahead. I'm just kidding. Um,
Well, it's a long story, but a lot of defenders come through the course, and I've been doing this since ALS. I throw Secfo at them, and it really gets like under their skin. But I'm
I
like,
could okay, so you're team Secfo and you're asking me. So I didn't know which side you were on when you asked me that question, but I'm gonna tell you it didn't land well.
okay, all right. But every time you ask one, it's like we've been conditioned not to like, as opposed to I just don't like it. Um, so it's crazy to hear that. And then you break it down. I'm like, well, I'm calm. Don't call me calm no more. Call me communication squadron.
Yeah.
Um,
Secfo. That did you make that up?
no,
You didn't make that up. And security forces doesn't like that. Is that what you're telling me? I'm hearing this?
apparently from the students, just based off the students I've interacted with for the past 6 years, they hate it.
That's so interesting. So, well, when I was security forces, we would say SF, but then special forces does not like that. So,
Yeah, as you can say SFS, you can say security forces, but don't you dare
never heard of
J
that.
Lo it or anything like that. Yeah,
J-Lo.
yeah. All right, back to the rapid fires. Most embarrassing moment.
Oh my God. I can tell you the most almost embarrassing moment. No, most embarrassing moment. It
Okay,
actually has to do with the military.
okay, even better.
Yeah. So I was getting ready. I was a PME instructor, okay, where I was emceeing an graduation that had 350 people there, okay? And before we start the ceremony, we always check over the students and we look over
Okay,
their uniforms, right? And you just make sure everything's good to go. They're all straight. I checked over my flight leader and I'm looking at him and he's looking at me and he goes, your uniform is confusing me. And I go, why? And he goes, because it's mirroring mine. And so I looked down at my uniform and I was like, oh my God,
it was
I'm
the
on the
same,
wrong side. Everything was on the wrong side.
and
And
that was at grad.
that was at graduation. And
Oh,
it was, yeah, graduation. And I'm going to MC and I'm the PME in the PME center, right? So all I could do was I grabbed his arm and I looked at him straight in his eyes and I said, oh my God, thank you so much. And I ran to the bathroom. And it was a really great, I know we're not talking like about that yet, but it was a really great leadership lesson because I was like, oh my God, can you imagine if I was a jerk? Like that would be the greatest thing
I'm
for
the
them.
instructor. Yeah.
Yeah, like what? So anyway, it was really almost embarrassing, I would say, but he
Okay.
saved.
All right. Yeah, that biggest fear every time I put my blues together for the first time, especially now that I got like cookies and all that stuff. I got to figure out where they go. Last question. Dinner for three. Three historical figures who are no longer with us. Who do you wine and dine with?
Okay, 100%. Well, historical figure
Hmm.
or like famous person? Oh,
Well,
historical.
famous people.
Okay, 100%. I want Dr. Wayne Dyer at this table.
Okay.
Dr. Wayne Dyer, he passed in 2015, I believe it was. He was an inspirational, spiritual, motivational kind of person. Wrote tons of books and just an amazing. I'm like all about him now. So he'd have to be there. Who else would be there? I would say probably Esther Blake.
Mm,
That would be cool.
yeah.
That would be so cool, especially because I can talk about the things now.
I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that would be awesome. And then a third person, I would say my grandma. I never met her.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll
Oh,
go grandmother.
yeah.
All right. And yeah, you survive rapid fires.
Oh my God, that was really difficult.
Well, people will come on here and they're like, I've listened to your episodes and I've only listened to the rapid fires because I'm trying to find a trend of questions you ask. The dinner for three is a popular one. That's kind of that in the book is the one that's stuck around. But yeah, if
That
and
one
I,
was hard, Bodie, because I've been reading so much and I'm just like, I love all the books. So
yeah,
that's a hard one.
okay, well, yeah, that's a hard one too. Books because it. I had someone the other day. I had like 5 books they threw at me. Um, Makes a lot of resource recommendations. But now, just to kind of unpack your story. So you grew up in Pennsylvania. Where at in Pennsylvania?
I did Northeast near Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area. If you watch The Office, Scranton put
Oh, so you're a homer with The Office.
you know it. So yep, it's like 20 minutes from Scranton, close enough.
Okay. So you grew up there. What were your aspirations as a kid?
I wanted to be an astronomer.
Really?
I just all the way up until I realized how much math there was. And then I was like, I don't know if this is for me.
Like algebra 2?
Yeah, right about that point. No, I lost interest after a while, but I've always maintained a love of space. However, yeah, I wanted to be an astronomer. I had zero idea I was going to be anything near close to the military until I went to the recruiter's office when I was 18. And I really, beyond that, I didn't really know. That's what I wanted to do as a kid.
So you
Yeah.
liked hanging out at planetariums and
Oh my gosh,
eating
everything.
space ice cream.
Yeah.
And have you watched the Challenger series? I believe it's on Netflix.
I have not. No.
Ooh.
I'll have to. Well, I don't. Do I want to watch that?
Well, all right. It's hard to watch, very hard to watch, especially at certain moments. But they go really in depth with each of the astronauts.
Well,
Like
that's great.
it's really good. It was
Yeah.
very well put together. It was actually it's a highly recommend documentary.
Like,
But the Challenger, I believe it's Netflix. I'll find it and I'll send you a message. But
okay.
definitely watch it, especially if you like space. Now, let me ask you this: you mentioned you went to the recruiter's office when you were 18 years old.
Mhm.
If the Space Force was around when you were 18, would you have
Oh,
done that route versus the Air Force?
listen, 100%. Like that one, yes, a 100%. If I
Because
would
their
have
infancy was when you were getting out, pretty much around that.
totally, if I would have known that there was like like any space jobs in the
Yeah.
Air Force, I would have gone that route. I had no clue. So yeah, 100%.
Okay. And what made you go to the recruiter's office?
So I was going to a campus, a branch campus of Penn State up by where I
Okay.
live. And I was I was taking general courses my first semester. I had no idea what I wanted to major in. And I was working full time as a waitress. And I'm just trying to figure out what the heck, you know? And I was one of the hostess, I think it was at the restaurant I was working with. She was
What
like,
restaurant? Is this like a chain restaurant?
no, it was called Jim Dandy's.
Okay.
Shout out to Jim Dandy's that no longer exists. And
Okay.
yeah, it was it was such great food. Anyway, um, so the hostess there, she was like, "Oh, well, I only have a couple more weeks here. I'm joining the Air Force." And I was like, "Air Force?" She goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, well, what's that about?" And she told me, and she's like, "You should come to the recruiter's office with me." And I was like, "No." And I said, "I'm not interested in that at all." And she goes, "But you might be. I just like come talk to her. See, because I'm really excited." So she's kind of hyping it up. And I was like, I guess, like, what else am I don't know. What else am I doing? Right.
I'm bored. Yeah.
So I went to the recruiter's office and listen, I promise you, the moment she put on that tape of the young airman that had her own dorm room, and I think
Mm.
she might have had a fish tank. And I am the youngest of 8 kids who got my own room at age 17. I was like, this looks like the life for me. And so I immediately was sold.
That VHS did it.
Oh my gosh. Like that was, and I know other people that remember that tape too.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was just like, this is so interesting. A completely 180 pivot, like
Yeah.
to what I was thought I was gonna do. Yeah. So that's oh my God.
Something about restaurants. I was working at Red Lobster. Um, to all the listeners out there, especially that know me from PME, two-time server of the year, Red Lobster for Sumter County. Not bragging, but I was making salads one day, and one of the guys there was like, "Yeah, I'm heading over to the Air Force recruiter's office after our shift," and I'm like, "Okay, cool." He's like, "You want to come with me?" I was like, I don't think so." And he's like, "Dude, it's great, man. Benefits, education, all this stuff." And he really hyped me up, and I ended up going over there. He no showed. I showed up, and then when I went in there, my recruiter was like, "You might have the opportunity to travel the world, or you can stay here the rest of your life." And I'm in there with my Red Lobster white shirt and black pants, and he's like, so he could smell the tilapia on me, and he's like, so you make the choice. And he didn't lie. Everything my recruiter told me was fact about my career. He's like, you'll sweep rocks your first couple of years, and I went to DM and swept rocks. So he it was incredible how he knew that what was going to happen. But so
Wow.
you go there, and how was that like breaking that news to your parents?
Oh my gosh. So well, I just my mom and my stepdad, he didn't care. But my mom has a totally different story that she tells. It's hilarious actually to have
Yeah.
her recount what happened. I think she did at my retirement ceremony. Anyway, she so I went home and I called her to my room and I said, Mom, I have some news. I said, I've decided a new plan, right? And she goes, okay. So she's thinking I'm changing colleges, like, okay, major, blah, blah, blah. I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm gonna join the Air Force. And she said, I'm sorry, what? I said, I'm going to join the Air Force. I think that's a great opportunity. And I'm like, then trying to sell it to her. Now, my mom and my dad was in the Navy, and so she was a Navy wife for 17 years.
Okay.
So she loved the military life. She loves what it brought, all of the things. So she had to digest it at first. but I don't think it took her very long before she was super supportive. And she was like,
Mhm.
hey, if this is what you want, I support you. She said to me, because I was about to go to MEPS and pick my job, and she goes, just whatever you do, please do not pick military police.
So you picked open general, which got
No, no. I went to MEP's office and they were going over what I was qualified for. And he's showing me like all the administrative, I did really high on English and all that. He's like, administrative jobs, you'd be great at this. And I was like, no, that sounds boring. I don't want to sit behind a desk. And he's like, well, I go, what's that one? And he goes, oh, that's dog handler. I was like, that looks cool. And he goes, well, you got to be security forces first before you can do that. I was like, yeah, sign me up. That was, I am not exaggerating. That's how I responded.
yeah.
And he goes, are you sure? He's like, it's a little bit harder than basic training, the tech school. He's like, he's trying to talk me out of it. And I'm
You're like,
like,
no, I want to play with dogs.
no. I said, no, I don't want to sit behind a desk. I want to, like, if I'm going to do this thing, let's do it.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. And little did I know I'd be sitting in a truck on the flight line, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so then I came home and my mom's like, okay, what job did you get? And I was like, security forces. And she goes, Mary, what I told you not to do. I go, Mom, no, we're the first line of defense for the base. Like, come on, it's the coolest thing. She goes, do you hear yourself? So she goes, you're the first one. I was like, no, it's gonna be great, Mom. So I empathize with my mother now, as I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I can't imagine having this conversation in that way with her.
She's gonna walk in there and go like hashtag SecFo. You know. Oh,
God love my mother and her patience.
okay. So you broke the news. You're a defender. You go to basic. When you came in, and the reason I asked this because it was a different time
Mm.
than where we're at currently in 2023. As a female in the Air Force, when
Mm.
you first came in, what sort of obstacles did you have to encounter? Was there any sort of like harassment, discrimination, any of that kind of stuff?
Um, yes, and yes. I think in reflection, I think I didn't know, how do I put this? Yes, there was a massive amount of
Yeah.
that. The culture was extremely unhealthy.
And as a defender.
Yes, there was 400 cops in my unit, 10 were females. So we were, greatly outnumbered. There was a box that they would put female defenders in, and you were one or the other. And that, unfortunately, you were either mean or, as a B word, you were either that or you were liked a lot of boys at the same time, right? And so I felt very, very out of place in that job. The harassment was rampant, not directly towards me. I think I developed a thick skin very quickly, and I became complicit and part of the issue
Yeah.
because that was my survival tactic. But yeah, it was not good. But what I was going to say was, I think that there's an element of, I didn't know I thought that was the military.
That
I
was the
thought,
norm.
yeah, I thought that was like, well, no one seems to be doing anything or saying anything about it. Maybe I just have to ignore it. Like, I didn't know that wasn't okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
What do you think the biggest strides you've seen in terms of eliminating a lot of that culture in the past 22 years, 11 months, 21 days?
Yeah. I think I don't know if there have been great strides in it actually going away. I think there's been great strides in having the conversation,
Mm.
about making space for the conversation to take place. There were no snippets of any leadership telling me, hey, if you experience XYZ, that's not okay, come see
Yeah.
me. Like, there was not a thing. And so I made that part of my leadership philosophy, my leadership, how I led. And I made sure that people knew what was okay and what wasn't right up front, and that they owed it to themselves and their teammates to come talk to me if anything was amiss. And so I think that has been improved greatly, is just at least, and then the SAPR program, having that available, that wasn't the thing when I was coming up. And in fact, like reporting wasn't a thing. And had I even thought to report, I would have been hugely ostracized. So I definitely went into survival mode for those
Yeah.
3 years. Yeah.
I think with in terms of pushing out the agencies that are out there, the military's like really brought those into the limelight a lot more. When I came in '09, I didn't know what mental health and the chaplain and I didn't know where all these places were. But now, I mean, you got defenders who are going to mental health. Uh, I just had that conversation with someone the other day about how the stigma is still kind of there. And what do you looking at, like, the Air Force of 2030? And I know you're not currently active duty anymore, but where do you see the military, 7 years from now in terms of promoting mental health and SAPR and all these other great programs that they have to offer?
I think it's only going to get more progressive. Number one, that's a hope of mine. I feel like the writing's on the wall that
Mhm.
it's going to get more progressive. I think that we're going to be forced to get more progressive with the proactive and
Yeah,
the culture building in well-being and resilience, as opposed to the reactive, because unless the country drastically develops mental health professionals, in the next 7 years, we're going to be understaffed, undermanned in that regard. So I think we're going to get smarter on how to get to the left of these issues so that there's less reaction. And those people who really need to go to the mental health resources or the chaplain, like they'll have those available. That's the way I think it should go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even like today, like I was telling you before you record, I was teaching emotional intelligence for a group of commanders, and talking about emotions is not something that I would have thought I'd be doing in the military even 5 years ago.
Right.
To see a lot of that stuff being brought up is very encouraging, and I definitely think they're making strides in the right direction.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned you were a PME instructor,
Mhm.
Airman Leadership School.
Both Airman Leadership School and Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, we were a dual schoolhouse.
Let me guess, McGee Tyson. No, nope, nope, nope. Uh, Dual schoolhouse.
Rapid fire question.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I pushed the people out.
Oh,
Location.
Hickam, Hawaii.
Oh, Hickam. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why I forgot about. I was so focused on the landlock
So
state.
Jay Bear and Hickam had both in their schoolhouse, but we were the only, at the time, we were the only school that ran them sequentially, not concurrently. So we had an ALS, then an NCOA, then an ALS, which was amazing because we really would have students or airmen in one class and then their bosses in the next
That's
potentially.
crazy.
So it was really cool to kind of see the connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Which one did you find more difficult to teach? Airman leadership, and just for our non-military folks, Airman Leadership School was basically where soon to be frontline supervisors go through and get training for. I mean, it's basically accelerated learning for 24 days or so, and then the non-commissioned officer academy is once you've been a supervisor and you're elevating in more towards a flight chief. Basically, you're going to be running the entire work center and not just supervising people. You go to NCOA. So which one of those two did you think was more challenging?
Airman Leadership School, which is funny because when I was going to the job before I knew anything,
Yeah.
I thought I am going to enjoy Airman Leadership School so much more than NCOA. I just knew, and then I got there and I was like, oh my gosh, they don't get any of my jokes.
Oh yeah.
Like NCOA were like my peers, so it was just a totally different dynamic. It was so much more. I don't know. It was just more fun.
Yeah.
Um, and I found it challenging with Airman Leadership School because, in hindsight, now that we're talking about it, I think it was challenging for all the right reasons. We have these young emerging leaders who are questioning things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we want. And I don't think I had the skill set to foster that as much as I would now.
Right.
And so I think that's why I labeled it as challenging,
Yeah.
but no, it was it. but that I don't want to make that like the theme of it was amazing.
Yeah.
Both courses were amazing, but you put me in
And
a
a good
box.
spot. And a good spot to do it too. I always say that ALS is more like and this is not to be demeaning, but it's almost like a puppy that you bring home. You can potty train it. You can get it to, eventually go out in the yard. NCOA, that dog's about 7 years old. It's a little bit harder to get it to potty train, but you could still do it. You can
Yeah.
still do it at that point. But no, ALS,
You
yeah,
think they're more moldable, they're more spongy, is what you're saying,
hmm
right?
yeah, and especially if
Yeah.
they see that you really care about them and you really invested
Yeah.
in them. But no, ALS was fun. So yeah, you got the PM. I think we talked about that at AFSA last year that you were PME before.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yep.
That's why
So
I felt at home with that crew. It was all
yeah, you walked in there. You're like, I'm previous PME. Y'all are all evaluating me right now. I know it.
that's right. Get
And
you
that's
look
the
right.
worst thing about standing up in front of PME groups at like AFSA is every one of them have a instructor rubric in their head that
Uh-huh.
they are counting your ums and uhs and all this other stuff that we do.
Ruthless.
Yeah. Yeah. The joke part, it was kind of funny you said that because my very first class, my ALS class, I had a dry erase board right by the door. And I'm like, all right, this is gonna be perfect. I'm gonna change their lives here from day one. And I wrote this quote on the board. And I'm like, they're gonna walk in, that quote by itself is gonna set the tone and change their lives. That was a fart in church, that quote on the board. Nobody got it, no one liked it. And every day I would come in and I'm like, hey, and I would try to like word that quote into my lesson.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we got it. You said your quote on the board.
Yeah.
So then I made a dad joke and it went over really well. And I'm like, oh, they like potty humor. Okay. So I started writing dad jokes on the board and that became my calling card. No one wanted, Vince Lombardi quotes.
No.
But
But I love the way you you set that story up because man, people will humble you quick.
oh
Like
yeah.
like you think, man, I'm gonna walk in here and this is it. It's gonna be great. And truth be told, and I don't know if you feel this way, I have the feeling that you might. I learned so much more from my students than they ever could learn from me. I
100%.
I felt like I was cheating every class. I was like, man, I got 14 of you teaching me. You only got one of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, totally.
One of the worst things I ever did as a brand new instructor is I didn't know the answer to something that somebody asked.
Oh,
And I did a relay question or a reverse question. I threw it back to the flight. They were like, sir, what do you think of such and such? And I'm like, I could tell you how I feel, but that's y'all got to be proficient critical thinkers.
yeah.
What do y'all think the answer is? And no one answered. And then they're like, we don't know. And I'd already set it up with, I know the answer.
Right, right.
So I said, wait a minute. What did you ask me? Repeat the question. And they ask it again. I'm like, oh, I misheard you. No, no, no. I actually don't know the answer to that. But we'll find out. But yeah, you're right. Learned so much about myself.
If I was in that class, if I was in your class, right, I would have said, well, what did you think we asked you?
Yeah, I would have been like, that's where I would have been like, look, let's keep this lesson going. Um, but looking back at your PME journey, what do you think was the biggest thing you really learned about you?
Oh my goodness. So I learned that when I stepped in front of the classroom, I knew what home felt like. And
Mm,
I was terrified. I shared the story previously somewhere else, but I said, my first lesson was stress management, which I think is hugely ironic. And I stepped in front of the class and I was terrified of all the things you have to keep in mind, getting evaluated, all the things. But I felt like, wow, I'm supposed to be here. So I think that was probably one of the most unexpected comforts that I got from PME. One of the biggest things I learned about myself, though, was that it's interesting. I think it's myself, and then it's also a combination of like generally speaking how we judge people by snippets of what they show us.
yeah.
I was in class one day. I've been there 2 years at this point, and I'm in class, and the students, it's probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks in, where they're kind of getting comfortable with me. And one of them was like, yeah, I was afraid to get you. I heard about you. And I was like, heard about me? And they're like, yeah, all the people that came before, like, were telling us, I hope you don't get Sergeant Polanco. And I was like, really? Like, this is like shockingly news to me, right? And I said, why? And they said, because you're the mean one. And I was like, so they see my face and I'm looking at them like, I'm the mean one. Like I thought they were playing a joke on me. And because I saw myself as extremely welcoming and kind and all.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, no, no. And I go, you guys are joking. Like, no. And then hand went up, hand went up, hand went up. Yeah, me too, over here. And so I was like, oh, wow, I got to really look in the mirror. Like, what's going on? So fast forward, like maybe 2 days, we're all gathered in the hallway, and I had 14 students, there's 56 in the school. All 56 are going through the hallway into the auditorium. And I'm standing there with the staff, and, we're all our people are going. And there's a piece of garbage on the floor, and our classes are walking by, and I see one of my students, let's just say Smith. I was like, oh, so Sergeant Smith, we're just going to walk right on by that garbage and just not pick it up. Is that what we're doing today? And he looks at me and he starts laughing and he picks it up and he goes, and then the other students were like fear in their face, and they just kept walking. And I was like, oh,
I am the mean one.
That's why. And so I was like, it was the biggest revelation, because I was like, my student knew me multifaceted. Like, he knew my sense of humor. He knew I was totally joking, right? And that I loved him dearly. But the rest of the students just got that one snippet. And so
Yeah.
I changed my ways from that point forward.
I said they'll judge you based off your bio picture or your demeanor in the hall if they don't know you.
100%.
Now, someone told me I collected teeth. I don't know what that means. They were like, you collect teeth for a living. I've still never figured that out. I was like, maybe that means I'm mean. I don't know.
That is some really non-specific, specific feedback.
Very. So you finished up there and you cross-trained out of security forces?
But yeah, so I cross-trained out of security forces at year 3.5.
Oh, before PME instructor.
I take that half, excuse me.
Okay.
3.5 years. And I went into optometry and in the medical group. And so I worked as an optometry tech for 10 years. And then I went into PME.
You know what they say about optometry jokes?
What do they say?
The cornier, the better.
I'm here for it. Yes, I love it.
And that's the episode this week.
Am I laughing too much? Is this gonna like throw off my giggling too much?
No, that was good. That it's virtual. When people don't laugh is when I get thrown off.
Oh, okay.
So you did optometry, and then the part of your story that really intrigues me is you at the recommendation of Craig Neary, who he is awesome. He is. Craig. Oh my gosh, one of the easiest people to talk to. I bet he was super intimidating to work for at times, but he's just so nice, so easy just to chat with, and someone I consider a friend. And when I was putting together the AFSA group last year in Orlando, or not this past, I guess last year, 2021 in Orlando, you're like the first person that he recommended that I have come speak, and you did, and your story just really resonated with every single person in there. And we had a lot of briefers, a lot of great briefers. That was a stacked crew of briefers that came in there and talked. But I told you last time when I was recording for yours, I said, the crazy thing was we were down the road from Disney, but you had a longer line of people to talk to you than Mickey Mouse had at Disney World, because when you got done, so many people were coming up trying to interact with you more and more, to where we legit had to take your line outside so the next briefer could come up here and brief. And you were very transparent, vulnerable. You were talking about failures that you've had. I think you said, I've had a failed business.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's me. And what was it about that message that you think really resonated with everybody?
I think it was one of the things that I really tried to do in that time. It was a delicate balance, because I wanted that hour to be about them.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, I needed to rip off a few layers of my own self so that they can do the same for themselves.
Yeah. You even said, I'm sweaty standing up here.
My God. Yeah. And I needed to do that. So I thought, if I'm going to I was coming out of a really great depression and anxiety episode of multiple years. And so I'm coming out of this and I'm feeling so much better at that point. And I thought, if this is not meant for me to share, I don't even know what the meaning is. And so that was my first public time really talking about the depths. And I didn't even go that deep into it, but
Yeah,
about what I was going through and why those things, why the quote unquote failures they don't hurt you. They don't matter. They matter in the sense of the stepping stones of growth. Like we just put way too much stock into these things we try to hide from one another when really everyone's going through pretty much the same thing.
100%.
So that's why I felt it really, really important. And I think that came across because I showed up 100% me. I was more me in that briefing than I had ever been before because I had rediscovered me.
Yeah.
And I could show before that I was still active duty at the time, Chief Master Sergeant. But before that, I think there was a layer of who am I supposed to be up here in front of for everybody.
Yeah.
And that was gone that day. I might as well have been up there in civilian clothes because Mary showed up, you know. So I think that resonated with people. I think they felt like they could look at me as a mirror in some ways, you know.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head because a lot of people, the feedback we were getting afterwards was even when one of the people that worked with me had missed your brief because they were out doing something and they came back. I was like, "You missed the best one we've had, like hands down." And because you're right, a lot of people were coming in and it was all about them, and there was that sugarcoating of I've been great, I've had a great career, you got to be great too. Where yours was more, I fell flat on my face. I've suffered from anxiety. I remember you talking about anxiety because that's something I had to conquer.
Mm-hmm.
But that really resonated with people. But even like people who might be listening to this conversation, how did you tackle beating anxiety? Because that is something that it took me quite a while. It wasn't just I went and got it in pill form. It was something that I really had to condition my mind to do.
I appreciate that you used the word tackle because when I hear you say that, I hear you say, how did you overcome it? That's how I
Mm-hmm.
hear you saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly 100% believe I have cured myself
Yep.
from anxiety. I'll clarify that in a second. But so the journey was first thing I did was I accepted that it was going to take time, and I accepted that I was going to be moving slowly. That was because up until this point I was full throttle 100% in my career, like full throttle on everything, yes to everything, never no to an opportunity, like. And so I realized I had to retrain my mind on what success looked like for me. So if
Yep.
I really wanted to overcome what I was going through, okay, got it. Mary, you're gonna have to slow down. Like you're gonna have to take this one step at a time. That was the first thing. But I think that simultaneously, and equally as important, I understood and decided that I was going to give myself grace. That was the pinnacle in change for me. That was it. And if you don't know what grace looks like, it's being for yourself, self grace. It's being the first one to offer comfort, condolence, and an it's okay kind of statement. And then being the very first one to accept that. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
grace. And I decided that I was going to do that. I was going to start being kinder to myself. I was going to be more open about my struggles with the people that needed to know.
Yeah.
I was the chief of the resilience office at the Pentagon, and I told my team, who were, senior, I have a senior, a master, and then all civilians in the GS-14 realm. Like I had to I had to be open about what I was going through because I needed their grace.
Yeah.
And so that was like the starting point of the process. And then, each day, honestly, it was the narrative I told myself, and just hey, you're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. But until then, you can't continue to take on the load that you were like, you just can't. Like my body, Bodhi, when I tell you, I had a complete cognitive shutdown. I could not do more than two productive things in an entire day.
Wow.
I had fog. I couldn't function. I was sleepy all the time. I worked from home at the time. It was the pandemic. It was
Mm,
horrible. And so that was my body's way of saying, okay, we've been telling you to take a knee for the last 6 years and you've ignored us. And so we're just going to go ahead and throw you down there. So yeah, and then from then on it was adding small habits here and there over time, starting a morning routine that was all about me, understanding what self-love really meant, falling massively in love with myself, my journey, what I bring, and then really at the end of this, is I'm skipping because there's a whole
yeah.
2 years of progress there, but really at the end of the day, understanding that my anxiety is not a disease. My anxiety is a gauge. And so when I start to feel something again, maybe it felt like it used to, a little heart palpitation or nervousness or something like that, I stop and I say, okay, what's going on in my world? Why am I feeling this? Where am I out of alignment? Am I doing something that I don't feel comfortable doing? Am I going down a path that's going to repeat? Like, so I listen to it now, and it's my greatest gift.
Yeah, it and 100% I agree with you about tackling and overcoming it because I was almost mad at myself for not facing my anxiety head on sooner, and I let it just follow me so long in my life before I really I think I was maybe 34, 35 whenever I really tackled it. But no, that's really good advice. And you said something there too. You said falling in love with yourself, given time for you. How would you describe that statement versus someone saying, well, that's selfish?
Mm. That is the $1 million question, because we as a society, we have adopted these behaviors and this stereotype of any time you want to do for you first, you're selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And culturally too, this could play a large part culturally with and gender roles as well. And so what I would say to that is it's really a simple explanation on how I've been able to um, see this as the only way. The only way for me, and this is my mantra across all things I share, is you first, me
Yeah.
first. Um, and we have the canned, I say canned, but it makes sense. I get it. Put your mask on first. We know, why. I get that, but it has become and fallen on deaf ears. But if you looked at it this way, here's how I view this. I view people who constantly put the job ahead of their own well-being, their family ahead of themselves, even their kids ahead of what they need, ahead of their spiritual growth, their emotional growth, all of that. You're really operating with one hand tied behind your back and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
You don't know, because you don't know what it's like to actually care for yourself first. When you start to do it and you start to make it a non-negotiable, you show up for everyone and everything completely different. And you're more prepared, you think clearer, you're ready to tackle problems. Like, I'm an entirely different person. I can't tell you. So, you know how they say fill up your cup? Fill up your cup first. Well, I know people aren't watching, but if you have a cup, um, and you keep filling it, you only get to the halfway point and then you dump it out for everybody else. You dump it out, you dump it out, you dump it out.
Mm-hmm.
You're always having to wait for that to get filled back up. But if you put habits in your life that keep the constant flow into your cup, it's constantly going to overflow. And
Yeah.
then that's always going to be enough for everybody. But you have to get out of your own head. You have to stop worrying about the perceptions of other people about you choosing you first.
Yeah.
That's the biggest hurdle. Once you get over that, watch how you show up. Watch.
Yeah. I'm glad you say that because even I've been teaching five voices for years now. And well, actually, 5 years stems from that, but how to be productive when there's never enough time. And one of the first things I talk about it in Giant, Jeremy Kubicek does a really good job of explaining it, but he says, you got to get that recharge, that first gear each day to put time into you, whether it's, almost it's recommended you book in your day with 15 minutes to an hour for just you. So me, I like to work out. I like to play with my dogs. I like to have coffee. I like to read. I'm my grandfather at this point. And
Same.
then at the end of the day, what is it that you can do just to unplug from the rest of the world? Not emails, slides for a lesson or any of that other stuff. It's like, what can you legit do just to unplug and disengage from the rest? And when I do that, a lot of times people give pushback and they say, that's selfish. I don't have time for that. I have a family, this, that, and the other. But then again, the flip side of that they really stress is, well, it goes against everything the military says in terms of service before self, which I totally get that. But whenever it's an average day, if you're not taken care of, how are you expected to take care of your spouse and your kids? Because you're stressed out and you're hating life. And now you come home and you have to, and we tend to take it out on family, or then we tend to take it out on our coworkers. And it just trickles down all the way from family to coworkers to community to so on and so forth. So I think that's very important, as you said, just to love you, take care of you. You're the only version. You got to make sure you're taken care of.
I just, you mentioned something before where you said you kind of, you got a little mad at yourself for not addressing your anxiety sooner. And I think that translating that into what we're talking about now, it's all about forgiveness, self-forgiveness. Like there's nothing that you can do to ever change the past. That was a part of the journey. What are you
Mm-hmm.
doing now to move forward with it? And part of my process, part of my healing process was forgiving myself once I had this awareness. I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, listen, nobody wore the badge of honor of busy better than me. Nobody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I took on the world at work. I was massively overtask saturated, self-induced 85% of it. Now I know. But it was total justification of, well, why isn't that NCO stepping up, and why do I have to do everything, and going home, and kids, don't you understand why I'm so stressed and I'm so busy? And I wore that badge of honor like, oh my gosh. And once I had gone through this revelation and I had to come to terms with that, then I had another step, another hurdle of self-love, and that was forgiveness. And it was, you did the best you knew what you could do at the time. It's okay. Again, what did I say? The internal narrative. I became my very best friend instead of what I used to be, my worst enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is really good stuff. This is I like the depression piece. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned COVID, and that was a time where a lot of people had uh, depression really arose because our entire world changed, things shut down, people can find in their house, telework from home, that social aspect of our lives was not tapped into or it was basically this over a compute. We found out about these things called Zoom and
Yeah.
Teams and all these other WebEx and all this other stuff that was out there. Um, how did COVID play out for you, and how did that impact your mental state?
So know that I'm coming to you with these answers after having understood. At
Yep.
the time, none of this was clear to me. But when COVID hit, so I was on the Hill in a fellowship program for all of 19. 20 hit, I had been assigned to the Pentagon Integrated Resilience Office. So January, I was there. February, I went to the chief leadership course, and then I came back from that. I was in the office for a week. And no, I actually got sent home from the chief leadership course because of COVID. So
Mm-hmm.
then I went straight home. I went right to my pseudo office. We had to make one. And we then had to figure this out. I remember when they told us not to come into the Pentagon that night, the exec and I got on the phone with the boss and our general officer, and we were like, sir, there's this thing called Zoom. Not many people know about it,
Yeah.
but I know about it because my sister used it once. And I was like, so we're going to figure that out, and we're going to jump on tomorrow first thing, and we're going to do this thing. We're going to work it out. We were actually, I think, one of the first offices in the Pentagon to implement this. If we weren't, no one can prove it, and I'm just saying we were. No, I'm kidding. But we did. We jumped into it full throttle, and And things were really, really hectic that first couple weeks because we had no idea. Everybody's scared. I'm homeschooling kids, all this chaos. But I think when things started to settle into the quote unquote new normal, that we were going to be staying home, I think that was where trouble struck. And the reason is because this is revelation now, not then.
Yeah.
I understand now that I was holding on to my career because 10 to 15% of it truly inspired me.
Mm.
And I held on to all of it for that 10 to 15%, right? And then when that went away, I was completely lost.
Yeah.
I feed off of people. I'm an extrovert. I love interaction. I wanted to continue to travel. So the 10 to 15% I'm talking about is being with people, leading a team, learning from a team, traveling around the country, getting into what I planned on doing was getting into the units as sort of like a secret shopper chief that wasn't in anyone's chain of command to figure out the pulse. Like I had all these grand plans and none of it.
Undercover boss or something.
Undercover boss, right? Because I wasn't not in anyone's chain of command. I was just some chief who liked resilience and I could learn, right? And so anyway, I had all these plans and none of that happened. And so I was completely lost.
Mm.
And then I didn't know it at the time, but that's why I was so deeply depressed, because I wasn't listening to myself at all. I had ignored myself for upwards of 6, 7 years, just doing what everyone else told me I should be doing. And I didn't know. And then on top of that, I felt bad for feeling bad because I had a great family and I had a job and I had a house and so many people were suffering. And so now I'm beating me up even more for feeling badly.
Yeah.
And that just was a spiral that took me all the way down.
Yeah. And one of the things that really helps people that I've talked to in terms of, we've already mentioned some of the agencies that are available out there for people, but also this program called emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
that has become very relevant like the past couple of years.
Yep.
What has emotional intelligence done for you in terms of your overall mindset and how you're saying you felt bad for feeling that way, but at the same time, it's all right to feel that way. It's okay to go through those emotions. So like what have you learned from that emotional growth journey that you've been on?
I learned that the very, and I'm kind of repeating myself, but the very first person that you need to treat well is yourself. I think knowing and having a self-awareness of why you feel the things you feel is
Yeah.
important. I think that's an important thing because I feel like we're why people. I mean, humans are why
Yeah.
entities. So we want to understand and have meaning. And so I feel like the why is important, but I think more importantly than even the why is just the being present, the here and now, and what can you do moving forward, and understanding that we are emotional beings. There's more than just the 5 emotions that people rattle off their head when we say name an emotion.
Yeah.
There's so
Thank you for
many.
saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many. And so when we have this awareness, when we can put vocabulary to the things that we're feeling, we then can put tactics in place to feel it and move through it. I'm not one for suppression. I highly recommend against it. I think we should acknowledge where we're at and what we're feeling and then process through that. I think that's huge. But I never allowed myself to do that. If I'm overwhelmed, then I'm weak. Back then, if I took too much on and I couldn't handle it, then I wasn't strong enough. I didn't deserve to be in the position I was in. I never really looked at the root cause of why, or how to even address those things. But then there's another layer to emotional intelligence, as we know, which is understanding and accepting the emotions of others and navigating that space and what that might look like. And so I offer, sort of an analogy. It made me think of, once you start being present and pay attention to the world, you get so many more answers. Just a side note for
Yes.
everyone. Just pay attention, just be present. So I'm driving on the road one day and I see this car in front of me and it's got a student driver sticker on it. And I'm looking at that student driver sticker and I'm like, why do you think that student driver sticker is on that car? Right. And I asked my daughter even the other day, and she's like, well, so that we could, know that they're new, and if they make mistakes. I was like, well, what happens if they make mistakes? Well, we won't get so upset. We'll kind of offer them a little bit of compassion because they're new. And, I said, okay, so they have a sticker for everybody to see. And so we will be a little bit more kind and a little bit more patient. And she said, yeah. I said, we all have a sticker. We just can't see it.
Hmm.
I said, so you have
I'm
to
still on
remember
that one.
that. I said, you have to remember that when you come in contact with people, people behave always for a reason, and it's their sticker. And it's not for us necessarily to say, show me your sticker. It's for us to say, hey, I understand that they do, and I can offer them kindness and patience and grace and maybe perspective when the opportunity presents itself. But that is really how we can start being a kinder society, is just understanding that. And so that was a great learning opportunity for me in that moment to kind of process through.
That's first of all, I'm still in the sticker. Uh, and then also you said something else too about the five like emotions and stuff that we go through. And I believe it was Emotional Intelligence 2.0. The book talks about how 38% of the time we misidentify the feelings that we're actually feeling at that point in time. We think we feel something, but it's actually something else. Or just our emotional vocabulary is not that vast. But
Yeah.
what made you decide, hey, I've got to part ways with the Air Force? I get it, you're over the 20-year mark.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide at that point in time, like this is the time to hit the button? Because you were, like you said, chief of resiliency. So I mean,
Well, you're coming at me with the questions today. All right. So I like to share this because I think that it's an important piece of clarification. So a lot of people, they have this idea that I'm joyful and present and happy because I retired. That's not true. I found my joy and my happiness, and then I decided to retire.
mm,
And I think that's a very important distinction, because it wasn't like the chaos of the job was lifted and then I could see clearly. That's not what it was. I had no idea I was going to retire. When I hit rock bottom, I thought I was going to be a good airman, and I was going to bandage it up and get back in the fight. Like that at first. That's what I first thought I was going to do. That's what we're trained to do, right? We're trained to patch it up and get back in. And I started the process of putting the band-aid on it. And then I realized, this inner voice, this inner dialogue was telling me, no, you got to go slower. You got to figure this out. This is once and for all, invest in you. And throughout that process, I started to identify some really key components in my life. I started to understand what I valued. I started to understand the purpose I was being pulled toward, what mattered to me in life. And quite honestly, just getting down to brass tacks, I made a list of things that mattered to me, things I wanted when I started to design what my life could look like. I wrote down, for example, I wanted more patience with my kids. I wanted to be more
mm,
present. I wanted less travel time. I wanted to have freedom and autonomy in my schedule. I wanted to be able to do something that inspired me every day. So I'm looking at this list of things. And then what's on the docket for me is to be boarded for command chief. And I was like, hang on one second. If I'm clear on my values and what I want, and I bump it up against this job, that does not
yeah.
fit well. And so I said, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to be put in for command chief. And I say it like that because, well, that's what was next. Like,
Mhm.
why would I not do that? Right. That's how I was being kind of trained to next thing. And so when I had that clarity, I went into my boss's office, and I was still very much in the healing journey. And I was so scared to tell him, because this was the first time in 20 years I had ever said no to an opportunity or the next thing.
Yeah.
And I went in and I said, I've talked to you about this. I really think we need to pull my name from consideration. Don't even board me for command chief. It would be of no service to myself, my family, or the airmen at this point. At this point, it could be future, right? And he was like,
Yeah.
oh, absolutely. That's no issue. There's always next year. And I was like, okay. Bodhi, I walked out of that office, and I am not kidding you. I got hit in the face with this realization. I just made my own decision. And the people who love me still love me. Like,
Mhm.
I know it sounds so simple, but I'd never considered that. I had been people pleasing for years, decades, and I did for me first, and that was the result. So fast forward, more months of healing. 6 months later, I said to my husband, I think I'm going to retire. I think this is the end of the road for me. And he, of course, 100% has been my biggest supporter. And then about 4 months after that, I said, do you care if I retire early? And he said, not at all. And so I retired 6 months before my 36 months as a chief. I didn't make it to my 36 months.
Okay. And I appreciate that. Like I appreciate the fact that you were like, no, I'm doing this for me. And what wow, talk about having a good support system there too.
Yeah.
Um I'm a firm believer that we should never tell somebody you've got to stay in the military or you've got to do this or one of the new instructors that we had trained here was had told someone like yeah I told them they shouldn't get out of the Air Force. I'm like, don't ever tell anybody that.
Mm-mm.
They whatever life choice they want to make, let them do that on their own. And but a part about hanging up the uniform and your family, um, commander that I currently work with, he has this great story where he talks about we eventually in the military and with any job when you really think about it, you're going to go through a divorce
Mm-hmm.
with that job.
Mm-hmm.
And the military is a good example where if you're faithful, if you've been good to the military, you'll get a divorce and you get alimony and you get benefits and they'll treat you pretty well. um, but you could also get nothing but and just say, hey, we're going to part ways clean. But then it's, do you have that other family waiting for you on the other end when that stuff is hung up and put in boxes and the,
Yeah.
I'm under the impression, even when my career is kind of, I'm on the back nine now, and for me, I don't think there's a shadow box or anything that's more important than family, and even a pay grade. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, kudos to you for doing that. And t- you mentioned the failure piece at AFSA
Mm-hmm.
about your business,
Mm.
and talk to us about some of the bumps that you had with that and lessons learned.
So when COVID hit, oh, this is good stuff because when I understood what I was doing to myself, I was able
Mhm.
to have a breakthrough. So COVID hit, this is 2020, and I'm at home and I'm going stir crazy. Like this is probably 6 months into COVID, and every coping mechanism that I had previously used to shove down anxious feelings was no longer available. I couldn't go volunteer for the Chiefs group. I couldn't go hang out with airmen. I couldn't lead on my team for stuff. I couldn't have any of those tactics, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, what else? But let's just start a side business. I'll start this online. I'm a crafter, a hobby crafter. And so I was like, let me just start this online membership community. It'll be great. We'll have this presence there, and we'll do all this. So administratively, the bumps were easy to identify.
Yeah.
I hired somebody who was not qualified to do the website that I wanted. And then I didn't find out till it was too late. I worked with, a wonderful teammate and then a teammate that I didn't quite get along with so well, so I just, a lot of the easy bumps to see, right?
Mhm.
But the real reason that it was unsuccessful was it because it wasn't for me. I can sit there and I can tell you that I gave up on it at the very end because it was going to cost me so much money to fix the site. But at the end of the day, it wasn't for me. It wasn't meant for me. And the reason is because I was doing the same exact tactic I did previously, and I wasn't addressing the root cause of my issues. I was looking for a band-aid, and that band-aid was called busy.
Yeah.
And so when I dove headfirst into that busy project, I could avoid all the other things that I should have been paying attention to. So that was unsuccessful. That business didn't take off, which is, it's fine. Is a great, great learning lab. Cost me a bunch of money, but that's okay. It's a learning lab. And I think that, once I came through that, it was almost like this, okay, Mary, it was like me talking to myself, like, okay, Mary, you got that out of your system? Like, you gonna actually try to do the work now? And I listened and I said, yeah, okay, I'll do the work. So
Well, speaking of doing the work, tell the listeners about all the amazing work you're doing now. Because I recently did your YouTube. Would it be? Is it podcast? Is it a?
Hi, it's a YouTube channel. I don't have a podcast yet.
Okay, so your YouTube. You're way better at YouTube than I am.
I've
I
had a
just
lot of crafting experience. I have a pretty large crafting YouTube channel, so I learned
I
all the
I
things.
can't figure out YouTube, and I can't like I'll have one. I'll totally behind the curtain here. I'll post a YouTube episode, and it'll get. This is not good, but it'll get 1,000 views. And then I post one a week later and it gets nothing. I
Oh,
don't get
well, listen, the YouTube algorithm is for none of us to get. It's just to keep us guessing the whole time.
it.
But I could talk offline with you a couple tips and tricks.
Okay, we'll try that. But
Yeah.
yeah, but tell them about your pod your oh my gosh, I did it again, your YouTube
My
channel.
YouTube. Yeah, I really probably should just transfer all the audio onto a podcast if I'm honest.
I can help you with that.
You can. Oh, look at this teamwork. So I have my hands in a few things. I joked the other day when someone asked me if I was available for something. I was like, yeah, I don't have a job. And then my friend goes, Mary, you have like five. I was like, I guess I do, but when you're doing all the things you love, it doesn't feel like
It's
work.
fun, yeah.
It's so fun. So a couple things. I'm a contractor for different companies where I go out and do leadership development training with organizations. And so I pick up jobs here and there. I'm like a freelance, I guess you can pretty much call it, right? So I do that. I love it. It's just, I'm alive when I'm out there with folks and it's so much fun. So I'm doing that. I'm also recently EQI certified, EQI 2.0, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and EQ 360, which means individuals or organizations could hire me to give the assessments. Now, the assessments are actually, I want to say, don't quote me, but level B, which means that they have to have someone certified to go over the assessment with you because you won't
Mm-hmm.
understand it as to the depths that you should if you're alone.
Yep.
So just got my certification to do that. Really looking forward to launching that with folks because I went through my own assessment of EQI and I had so many breakthroughs with my coach that I was like, whoa, I'm pretty aware of the, emotional intelligence
Oh, it's deep.
education. Yeah, it's
So
amazing.
deep.
So yeah, so I'm doing that. I also, like I said, have my YouTube channel where I bring on guests, and then I also do individual videos where I talk about. It's all under the umbrella of Living Well, which is a huge umbrella.
Do you have one of the new handles, the YouTube handles?
I do. I believe so. I
Okay.
should. Yeah. Mary, it should be Live Well. I
It's
know
in
my
the
crafting one.
description. It's in the description.
Yeah, it's in the description. But I love that. I'm on Instagram doing social media, LinkedIn. I'm sharing my messages across all platforms because I feel like different people are everywhere, like
Yeah.
different. So I'm busy with that as well. And I'm also writing a lot. I have 8 books in my head, just so everybody knows.
I was gonna say, you're gonna be publishing a book?
I am, yeah. So I recently started a like super passion project. It's a book. It's for transitioning veterans, transitioning military members. And it's tackling or it's providing hopefully information that is not in your transition assistance program enough, and that is the emotional and psychological expectations as you move into your new life.
Yeah.
And so that I've noticed that when I share those things out with the public, the response I get is clear. There's a demand signal for us to be talking about this more. And so I when I have more information, I'll share more information, but I've already started it and I'm hugely inspired to be writing this book. And I'm cannot wait for it to come out.
Very
Can't wait.
nice. Okay.
In fact, can I tell you a secret?
Yeah. Is this for, do I keep this on the episode or cut this
No,
one
you
down?
can keep it on the episode
Okay.
because I want to recommend this technique for everybody who wants to write
Okay.
a book. So I mentioned Dr. Wayne Dyer prior in the podcast. So he has this thing because he wrote like 41 books, but he has this thing where when he's got a book idea, he takes an old book and he makes a cover for it and he wraps it around the book and he puts it in front of him when he's writing. And it's this way of affirming that this book is already written. He's just the conduit for it.
Mm.
And so right here, I know we're on a podcast, but right behind me, there's
Gold
a book.
one?
Yep.
Yep.
There's a book there. It's green. It's like OD
Is it
green.
green?
Yeah, it's like OD green. And it has
Okay.
dog tags on the front. But it's not the final cover. but it
Yeah.
is a cover. And so now instead of me feeling like writing is daunting or I'm scared to do it or I don't want to do it, I've created an experience. So I put the book next to me, I light a candle, I put on some good music, and I just write.
Yeah.
And it's been working amazingly well. And so yeah, anybody who wants to write a book, can't recommend that
Good
enough to
point.
do that. Affirm it, you know.
Yeah. Well, last question here for you. What final comment? It's not really a question. What final comments do you have for our listeners?
Well, I have a couple things that I want to share. I would say the first and most important thing is something we touched upon in this podcast, and that was understanding the value of making yourself a priority in your life, making yourself the priority in your life. I want everyone to be inspired to give that a try and see what comes out of it. You
Yeah.
will likely be surprised at the outcome from making a non-negotiable for yourself. I can guarantee that most of the people listening brush their teeth at least twice a day. Like
Yeah.
that's a non-negotiable. If someone called you in off work in the morning and was like, "Hey, you got to come in here super early. Don't even dare you brush your teeth." You'd be like, "Okay, number one, you're crazy. Number two, I'm going to brush my teeth." Right? It's a non-negotiable. When you decide that putting yourself first is a non-negotiable, nothing's going to steer you away from that. So that's really the first thing that I want to tell everybody. The second thing is when you're doing this investment in yourself, really look at what you dive deep, look at what you value and what you want, and then design your life. Write it down. 2 years ago, when I was with you on, out there at the AFSA, I designed my life. And I had no idea that 2 years later, I just had faith, but I had no idea that to the minute of my life, the way that my days look is exactly how I designed it. So just want to inspire everybody to do that.
Yeah. And I absolutely appreciate you joining us there and joining us here for this episode. Did you get that?
Yeah.
I,
What?
I, I did that at I think I told you how one of my fellow cadre, we were at AFSA.
Absolutely. I missed
Yeah.
it.
Went didn't land that time. But yeah, we
It's
were
only because we're virtual and I couldn't hear it quite.
so I'll tell the people out there that when we were at AFSA this past year, he and I were discussing who was going to go up and MC, introduce the next guest, and he was like, "Hey, you, Christopher Barton, that's his name. I'll totally dime him out." And he said, "Hey, if you go up there, say absolutely, like we're absolutely having a great day, or something along those lines." And I said, "Okay, yeah." So he's like, "No, actually, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." Well, I finally ended up going up to the podium, and then I threw that line out there, and it just went over great with the audience. I'm not exaggerating; they loved it. And at the end, people were coming up to him, and they were like, "Hey, you two guys were neck and neck with your jokes and puns, but that absolutely comment really put Bodie over the top." And he would grab people and bring them back and be like, "Hey, tell them I gave you that joke." And I'm like, "Barton, this is really sad. This is a new low for you." So yeah, we still talk about that. But no, I really do. I appreciate you taking time to do this. I appreciate you having me on your show, on your YouTube channel. And I appreciate you being here on this podcast. I will definitely keep in touch with you. I'll send you that Challenger stuff too. But yeah,
Wait, before we go, I need to
yeah,
thank you because I need you to know how meaningful what you're doing is. I know you know it, you feel it in your heart, but what you're doing is just so needed and you do it so well, and I just thank you for that, and thank you for the invite. I'm hugely honored to just be spending this time
of
with you, so I
course.
appreciate you.
Not to mention, you were on Rise from the Shadows. You were on the finale of Rise from the Shadows previously. So, but yeah, folks, if you enjoyed this episode, if you like what we're doing, head over, leave us a review on the shadowspodcast.com, on Spotify, and on Apple Podcast. I remember those are the big three. So definitely leave us a review. Also, stay tuned. We've got, so I have a PCS coming up. I'm getting episodes recorded right and left. My goal is to be recorded out until September. Uh, so yeah, I've got tons of good guests coming your way. So if you like what we're doing, also head over to the shadowspodcast.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or join our mailing list. so you don't miss any great episodes. And give us feedback. Let us know what you think. We've split these episodes up for 2023 into two-part series to make them a little bit shorter episodes. Every Monday and Thursday, new ones are dropping. If you like what we're doing, let me know. If you can't stand it, let me know. I need to know one way or the other what you think of it. But that will conclude this episode of the Shadows Podcast.